This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 87. Overall, if you establish good relationships with your students, which I know you do incredibly well, they're going to want to help you accomplish your goal. That's a powerful thing for them to see.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Erman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my co-host, Mr. Matt, the Mentor Rogers. Matt, so we are recording this right after the school year has started, and we did a great job of effectively planning our summer because you and I have not recorded together in over a month, which has been a really nice break and refresher. I know you did some traveling. I did as well. We were able to keep the pod going every week. We haven't skipped a beat yet in terms of releasing to our audience, but it was a nice break for us. So highlight of the summer from you, and then we'll jump in here.
Ooh, highlight of the summer. Oof. So we had the chance to do a trip of a lifetime. My wife and I flew from Baltimore to Calgary, Ontario, and got to check out Jasper and Banff National Parks and travel down to Glacier, and it was an outrageous trip between the glacier-fed lakes, and we saw a moose that we got unfortunately too close to. Not too close for danger, just, we are the people that try to follow the rules with the animals and, keeping distance. The moose did not want that to happen, so we tried to do everything right and got about 25 yards away, which was closer than we would have liked to be, and some grizzlies and all sorts of great things. So just an unbelievable trip. So that was probably my highlight. What about you, buddy? You've been real busy.
Yeah, so if you are watching us on Spotify or on YouTube and you're wondering how I'm sitting in my basement, if you've been watching the journey of me finding a recording space the last few recordings, I still am in the new house. If you look real quick, I'll turn it off for a second. I am sitting in front of a green screen because I have no other recording space in this house. And my wife was adamant that I cannot record in front of a cinder block wall, which is behind that green screen. So we moved. Everything has been smooth with that. The highlight, though, was we went with my brother, his kids, my parents, my wife's parents. We went to Disney, and it was everything it was chalked up to be. I hadn't been there since I was 10. It was exhausting. It was draining from the parent side, but my kids absolutely loved it more than I expected. The magic was there more than I expected. The excitement of the rides, the excitement of meeting characters. It was just an incredible experience. And we had a couple 14 and a half hour park days where my wife and I said before going, we promised ourselves that we would leave the park, give our kids their nap, and then go back. We never did that once. But the girls napped in the stroller. My son just powered through those 14 and a half hour days to the point where when we got home on the bus, he was still running into the hotel, pretending to be Buzz Lightyear until his head hit the pillow and he was out in about 3 seconds. So it really was an incredible vacation. I'm so fortunate that we were able to do that this summer. So it was a nice refresher because I didn't do anything work related at all. And then we came back and we hit it hard in August. So with winding up the year, I'll jump into our topic in 1 second, but I want to share two things. So one, we are about to hear a word from our podcast network that you've been used to hearing now each week, the Teach Better Network podcast reminder. But also I will be attending their Teach Better conference in October. I'm super excited to head out to Ohio to be a part of this experience. I'm going as a presenter. I'm going as an attendee to learn and to connect with others. And they also have set up, which I'm really amped to see, is they're calling a podcast row. And there's going to be, I think, about 12 or 13 now other podcasters that are in the network. They're recording live, connecting with teachers, just having an awesome experience. And as a part of all that, I actually have our first ever promo code to read off on our podcast, Matt. So we'll see how I do here. I don't have radio experience to try this out. So are you excited that in-person conferences are back? I know that I am. And in fact, I'm excited to announce that, as I said, I will be at the 2022 Teach Better Conference this October 14th and 15th in Akron, Ohio. I will be recording episodes live, attending sessions, and I will be presenting as I connect with a bunch of amazing educators. It would be awesome to see you there. So head over to www.teachbetterconference.com/register and use this code POWEREDUP, POWEREDUP 22 to save $50 off your 2-day registration. I hope to see you in October.
Well done, buddy.
How'd I do with that, Matt?
Yeah, that was great. What a cool opportunity too. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really amped about this conference. I love going to conferences. We recorded live at Pete and C. I'm excited to be at this one because it's really just focused on teachers getting together to be better teachers. And that just sounds like a really awesome environment to be a part of.
It also kind of, has a focus, but it also is wide open. I think a lot of these conferences we go to have a specific focus, which you choose. When you've been going to conferences for a while, you choose, 2 or 3 actual unique topics that you may learn new about, whereas a few that you may learn added tricks or tips, which can be, the return on investment can be a little challenging. So I wish you the best. I may sneak in there. I don't know. I
had told you a while ago that you should ask admin and jump on board.
I sent a message out, and we'll see if we can make something happen.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's hear from the Teach Better Network, and then we'll jump in.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
All right, Matt. So we're here, beginning of the school year. You've actually had students for about 5-6 days now, 7 days. So what are your goals for the 2022-2023 school year? So, we've done goal setting podcasts. We've done the power of goal setting with students. But I think it's important as educators that we set our own goals for a school year, specific things, big things, general things that we want to accomplish. So walk us through some of your goals and kind of your action plan to move forward with that.
So I had a theme last year of, make 4th grade fun again, or whatever kind of run that you want to go with. But it was the idea of getting back to what elementary should be. And that was dressing up, that was taking opportunities, that was bringing in subject matter experts constantly. And that is still a passion and interest of mine for this upcoming school year. But I'm recognizing in just a few days with these kids that they are distinctively a different group. And Ken and I were talking about this episode, or right about this before the episode, about how, my expectations of last year's group, easily, it's a very forgettable what September and October looked like, because we got to a rhythm where they knew the ways of the classroom, and they took advantage of that. And by being respectful to it, made the year very successful at the end. And it's hard to have poured your, heart and your energy into making a year successful, only to come out of it and say, all right, we've got to do it again with a totally different group. Even harder, I have siblings of students that I had last year and in previous years. So they have high expectations of what this year is going to be. There's a few differences with this group. not only, are they different kids, so they have their own, academic challenges, they have their own behavior challenges. That's normal with every group, and having, high expectations. But a few weeks ago, uh, probably longer than that, a few months ago at this point, we had the chance to talk with Anthony Wiggins, who happens to be my student teacher. And so the real key of this year is trying to identify, what do I do well, and what is my style, to use a Rhett Oldham style, component. What is my style, and how do I allow Anthony to develop that in my classroom under my parameters, to allow him to blossom, so that when he graduates in December, he can roll into a classroom. And, we have 2 full classrooms with positive impact with every single kid. So, I would hate to say that my goal is to manufacture this year, but in some ways it's picking apart the things that go well in my classroom so that I can pass them on, as well as, stepping into the background and trying to let him shine, while also following with care, through the next 15 weeks. We can dive in a little bit more, but
Yes, something to consider with the opportunity you have with having a student teacher, and I look forward to having Anthony back on, to see how he's grown. Is you're talking about passing on your best qualities to him for him to carry forward, which I think is extremely valuable. It's one of the best parts of mentorship, because they can see what you do so well, and they can hopefully pick it up faster. But also, I would encourage you to think about, what are aspects of your teaching that you think are your greatest weaknesses, and how can Anthony being in your room serve as an advantage for you to grow in that way. So is exposing your weaknesses to him, sharing them with him, things you've always struggled with or things that you feel you could grow with, doing it with him, trying to, work him through those same growth. Is that going to help you see it in a different way? Is maybe he going to be able to see something that he can point out to you? Or is just the experience of having another person going to give you an advantage? So let's say, and I'm not saying this is something that you would latch onto, but if you're a teacher that has always struggled with effectively doing small group instruction or student-led instruction, having another adult in the room is a huge advantage for you to be able to just have another adult and have that much more control over the room to get yourself more comfortable and confident for when there's not another adult. So just something to throw out there to consider, as using him to also provide you with an opportunity for you to grow, that will in the end impact him as well.
Absolutely. I think we're still in the, very kind phase, and I don't mean that he'll ever change from kind phase, but, he is growing as an instructor in so many ways, and it's awesome to witness. And I'm looking forward to the back end of our experience where, he has the full-fledged experience and can speak from experience and say, talking about those weaknesses, and I can pitch ideas because he understands what it is like to manage a classroom, yet he's only been doing it for, 4 weeks at that point. So I'm really excited about that. It has caused me to have conversations, productively, that I have identified things about my classroom, styles about my classrooms, natures of my classroom that I think are successful, that are just the way I run things. And that has been the most unique thing to just hear, like, oh, that was actually a pretty good idea. Oh, I know that there's a reason why I do that when I see a facial reaction, that's my gut reaction. Or, how can we process through? We were dealing with the classic disrespect. How do you deal with disrespect? We all know that kids are not, intending to upset you. They're not trying to be disrespectful, just for the sake of doing it. It is usually there's an antecedent to that behavior that's probably causing that, and it may have nothing to do with you. And so right now is a huge processing of what are those antecedents, what are those outside factors and what are those ways that we can navigate those so that we can, make the most of our time together. And I mean that with, Anthony directly as well as the students. But it's we had the realization today of how exhausting teaching is, and how never ending it can feel, and that this profession for 10 months is essentially on for 24 hours a day, many times, especially at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe not this year, but you can talk to this year as well. How do you involve your students in your own goals? Do you share your goals with your students for the year? Have you ever considered it or thought of it? Anything to add there?
Um, the the appropriate answer would be yes. I've involved my students year after year in the goals and what I was intending for. The answer is absolutely not, and I probably should. Um, we talk as coworkers about this, maybe not as explicitly, hey, here's the pie in the sky of what I want for this year, but we have things and markers that we strive for. Sometimes those goals are just getting our paperwork in and being allowed to come back the next year, and then some of them are excelling in certain ways, taking on challenges that we're prepared to take on. And I would say my half connected answer is we absolutely set class wide and group wide and individual goals with kids, but I can't tell you that I sit there and, at the beginning of the school year, I'm sitting here and, what are my end of year goals that I'm going to reflect on. That being said, there is definitely a point in time that, we're past at this point where you are considering, how do you want this year to be different than the past? How do you want to improve on things that were good momentum from last year? How are things that you knew you set up a routine that just you didn't love? Like, for instance, my end of day routine, I just didn't love. What have I absolutely focused on so that, they've practiced and they've proved that they're able to do it consistently? It's our end of day routine. Is it perfect? No. But is it better than where it was last year already? Absolutely. And so we kind of hold that firmness. I think I'll add one other thing and then continue to hear questions. Right now is a great time to consider firmness. And I think that's a really controversial thing to think about in teaching. We talk about pendulums, at least I do a lot. You come out, you want to be friendly because it's all about relationships, and then you realize you get walked all over, and then you get really firm, and then you have, kids that are scared to come to your classroom, and you realize they're not learning from you, and you work on that pendulum to get into that middle phase. And I had this realization with this group that I thought I would find a middle phase and stick there. And what I'm realizing is I have to find that balance point of the pendulum for each group. And that means it's okay to tough love, but it's also, has to be so much your internal data from being with the kids and investing your time and energy into asking real questions and conversations with them. So that's been a big realization of mine of how are we going to address what we need to. How are we going to set expectations? How are you going to expect what I've said for years, maybe not years, many episodes, consistency is key. Well, let's work together to identify what that consistency looks like.
Yeah, I think the sharing your goals with students is, not only something for you to consider, but our audience to consider. And I don't say this from a perspective of like, this is something I've done. It's shameful if you're not doing it. But, just to create an analogy for it, if you have a sports team, whether it be professional or just high school level, whatever, as a coach, if you have goals that you're hoping to accomplish, you would want to share it with the players so they know what you're striving for and they can work towards that. As a principal, as a leader, you're building goals you want the teachers aware of what those goals are, so they're working towards those goals as well as their other professional responsibilities. Me as a teacher, if I have specific goals that I'm looking to accomplish this year, and a lot of that is going to be related around how the students perform. And I don't just mean perform on standardized tests, I mean how they perform on a daily basis. I want them to know what those are. Because if I'm expecting, if my goal this year is to more effectively facilitate student-led activities, the students working a little bit more independent so I can do small groups one more time a week than I ever did in my career, I'm going to share that with them, because I'm going to let the students know, hey, our class is structured this way because this is my goal. Part of this for me to accomplish my goal is for you all to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Here's what I need to see out of you to help me reach my goal. Because here's why I think this goal is important, because it allows you time to work on things that you're more interested in. It gives you a little bit more choice and freedom. It gives me the opportunity to work with groups that I think could use my help a little bit more or could be challenged a little bit more. You start sharing them all the whys of your goals, and the students, for the most part, are going to latch onto that. You might have to remind them once in a while. You might have to bring them back into the conversation once in a while. But, overall, if you establish good relationships with your students, which I know you do incredibly well, they're going to want to help you accomplish your goal. That's a powerful thing for them to see. So for me personally, this year, as I'm still working as a secondary instructional coach. My goals are to continue to build relationships with the teachers that I'm working with. This is going into year 3. I have a lot more teachers that I have a good, solid rapport and relationship with, and others that I'm continuing to grow, which is my number one thing that I need to focus on to be an effective coach, because they need to trust me. They need to have an interest in working with me. And just a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to keynote for another district in the area. And part of my keynote was focused on creating what I was calling empowering experiences. And so by putting the word empower and experience together, I created this definition and this phrase. It's gaining knowledge, confidence, means, and abilities to do things or make decisions for oneself through events or occurrences that leaves an impression on our students. And so that really is a summary for my mission as a teacher. Everything I did, really, I could point to one of those words being the point of it. And I would say my other goal this year is to work with more teachers in creating empowering experiences, working with a few more teachers, getting them to focus more on what the students are doing to explore a unit or explore a single concept in a lesson, and just trying to get the students more actively engaged in the learning process. There's a lot of great things that happen in my district, and I want to really leverage the teachers that do it really well to support others that are hoping to do that more. But just seeing students become more and more active in the learning process, I think we're coming to a point where the school year feels normal to start, which is, I think, has been a really positive thing for teachers. We have a couple teachers having issues with our LMS getting up and started. And so the one teacher has no classes yet in Canvas. And I told her, I said, we'll just get out whiteboards and teach math. Just do something that almost feels alien from where we've been for the last few years. So advice for me, questions for me based on, what I shared with you and trying to push teachers and support teachers in working towards that.
Well, perfect that you asked, because honestly, Ken, in your position, I have been, so unsure of how you actually use goal setting. I've got to imagine it's a huge part of what you do, but unfortunately, you are not the most important member of your school community. Your goal is to make other people successful in a school year. And it's really difficult to say, oh, I know it was a successful year because, this teacher and this teacher and this teacher that saw me were successful. So I guess when you're talking about goal setting, do you use that heavily in your supervision, or is it just kind of you do it for yourself because that's where you derive your sense of purpose academically?
So I think that's a good question, and you're right. A coach is going to be the first to get cut, because although I think And I'm not saying this because I'm a coach. I think coaches are extremely valuable for teachers, especially when it's a system that is rolled out effectively. Um, yeah, I mean, goals is really everything for me, and it is mostly anecdotal because with working with as such a large audience as I do, there could be an argument made that I could tie my goals and my results to standardized test scores, because if I'm working with these set of teachers, I should have a direct impact on how their scores rise in a specific subject. But the reality is I'm working with 6 through 12. We have 4 buildings, and I'm working with much more of an audience than just tested subjects. And so a lot of it is anecdotal, and that's why what I like about my job is I get to focus on things that I think are valuable that also align to our district goals. And goal setting for me is everything in this position, because it gives me a focus and a purpose beyond my other main filter for is this important or not, is when a teacher asks for help. If a teacher asks for help, I'm going to help them. And that's what I constantly remind them. My number one job is to help you. So please just ask. But I think where the goal setting becomes important is looking at what our district goals are, looking at what the building goals are that usually correlate very closely to those. They might have a specific strand to meet that community, but then looking at where are my strengths and my passions, and where do I think we can improve the experience for students, and then how do I develop a vision around that. So what will I do when I work with teachers? What teachers will I target? How does my professional development that's offered throughout the year align to my goal? So, last year at the end of the year, I ran a session on breakouts, and I told the teachers, I will literally design an entire breakout for you correlated to your curriculum, and I will help you run it. And then it's your job after that. It's your job to run it the second year, the third year, and I'll still be there to help, but designing it in a way that I'll do all the work for you and I'll help you and you can see it, and then it's yours to run with. And, why did I choose breakouts? Well, one, because I was passionate about it. It's something that I did in my classroom, but also it aligns to that idea of empowering experiences where it's, it's leaving an impression on kids for something that's totally different. And so I would say that making sure that everything I'm doing is kind of lining up in pieces together. So that professional development at the end of last year, I've already had multiple teachers reach out to me and say, will you really make one for me? And they're already ready for me to come in and run a breakout for them in their classroom. And so, just snowballing those experiences together. And every time I'm able to work with a teacher, I build a little bit more trust. Maybe that teacher has two or three friends or 2 or 3 colleagues in the same department, and it just snowballs from there.
Obviously you're in a bigger district, so to reach a large majority of your staff would take an entire career, and so that's reasonable. And the classic saying, at least a long time ago, was the idea of a coach is to raise everyone's competencies, that the purpose of a coach being there is no longer, that it would be a job that expires. So with that being the case, especially in the position that you're in right now, how much of your job do you feel like you are, like, I would define your position of having a responsibility of almost vetting what is and what is not new academic or, programs, and making a decision whether it's in line with the district's vision or that, department's vision. That how much do you feel like you are experimenting with new versions, as much as almost a comparison of how much are you sharing, tried and true practices to teachers that you haven't worked with before in a, in a week, or how much of percentage wise do you feel like that is? Because while you're kind of thinking about it, like, I could imagine it's a lot of responsibility to always be searching the new thing and demoing it in a safe environment before you hand it over to teachers. But that's a big portion of your job, as well as emphasizing, hey, all of your, late adopters, getting them up to the point of even that midline is also maybe as big, if not bigger, of a priority.
Yeah, so I would say that as a coach, and I'm the thing that I'm most lucky about is that I have an incredible team. So there's multiple coaches in my district, both secondary and elementary, and we just work as a really great cohesive unit. So it's not a one man show. It's not a one man effort, which it makes it 1,000 times easier. So I would say we're a filter between both lenses. We're a filter from the teachers to admin, and we're a filter from admin to teachers. So we can, we try to be as much the eyes and the ears of the teachers, and getting things to the desks of administrators that we feel are really important, because we are still, we're still in the union. We are teacher contracts. We're 10-month employees. So we are teachers first. And so we can be that safe haven for teachers, but we can also listen to problems that we're hearing in multiple schools or in multiple departments, or where there seems to be a technology tool missing or a support system missing. And we can get it into the offices of our administrators and bring it to their attention. And frankly, they really appreciate it, because they don't get to have those conversations with teachers because they are the administrator. They're in their office more, and teachers are a little bit nervous and shy at times. At the same token, we can listen to administrators that want to roll things out, and we can help them come up with a plan to effectively do that. We can target teachers that we know would be good leaders, in the building to help us roll that out. We can also say, well, if that's something you want, let's think about how teachers are going to react to this. Maybe we should go XYZ instead of ABC. So it's kind of a neat position to be able to be a filter between the two. And as far as managing it all, it's been really good as a team. We've set goals as a team. We've really consolidated from a technology side the amount of tools that we're using and that we're endorsing. And so we've really trimmed it down so that teachers have just a few tools that pretty much do it all. And when teachers look at other stuff, I'll explore it for them, but we won't roll out professional development if it's not a part of our quote unquote approved tools that we're using. So it's definitely a dynamic position. There are days that are insane, and my head is spinning because I'm in so many different worlds at one time. But I always remind teachers, anytime I ever run a session, that their job is harder than mine. Being a teacher will always be the hardest job in a district. If you ever ask me, the grind, the exhaustion, the responsibility of being on at all times when the students are there, there's nothing more difficult than that. And so I'm very fortunate, and I enjoy being in the position. But teaching is teaching and teaching is always going to be the hardest, and it's also the most rewarding. There's definitely things you miss as being a coach.
Totally. So to be very specific, I mean, you kind of generally talked about, hey, I want to kind of do this. I want to expand my role. I want to reach more. What is one, observable and measurable thing that you feel like you want to bring this year that will be a reach, will be a challenge, and won't be necessarily a slam dunk?
So I can give you two very specific things. Last year, I have two experiences that really stick out to me. One was I helped teachers completely redesign the way they approached a lesson to get the students more actively involved. And I'm already set up to do that with them again this year. And I want to accomplish two things stemming off of that. One, I want to find another set of teachers to do something very similar where we rethink a lesson. The other thing that I want to accomplish with the teachers now I'm doing it with for the second time is getting them or helping them and supporting them in finding another lesson that we can accomplish the same thing, where we can reframe it in a way that gets the students more actively involved in the learning process and less of the consuming process. So I kind of went backwards on that, but I'm repeating with them, and I want them to find another opportunity for it. And then I want to find a whole different set of teachers to do the same thing with that I did last year, if that makes sense. Same exact scenario, except unit-based. I helped a high school teacher completely redesign an entire unit that actually ended with redesigning the final of the course. I'm already set up to work with that teacher again to start looking at other aspects of the school year that we can get the students more actively involved. They really directed the entire unit with their choice and their ideas. It was a stat project that I'm pretty sure I've talked to you about. So I want to keep that momentum going with that teacher. And again, I want to find another teacher that we really look at how to redesign a unit and getting the students more actively involved in the learning process. So it's that empowering experiences theme that I shared, but those are two very specific measurable things that I could point to and say, yep, the teacher I worked with again, here they did it again. And here's the new teacher that I worked with and what we accomplished.
I'm starting to hear, how you revisit fifth grade where you have the students, doing the teaching for you and, hand that over in that same sense, doing it with adults where, the adults are the advocates for good teaching practices. And then you're just there guiding them along the way. Yeah, I think you're in a really tough position. It's a vulnerable position. You need to prove it frequently style position. And there's also, you're getting pushback from admin in some capacities of what's your worth, as well as teachers being, I don't have time for you. Or, I don't have a relationship with you. Why am I going to trust you in my room? And so it's almost like a sales pitchy position as well, which is weird to consider as, educators. It's not, we've always been pretty shielded from, real world or business tactics, if you will.
No, it is. And it's one that's made me constantly evaluate just the way that I talk to teachers, the way that I listen to them, the way that I respond, the way I respond via email. It really makes you evaluate. It's really improved my interpersonal communication skills because I don't want to ever have a teacher think that I'm upset or, frustrated or, I don't want them to ever have a negative thought about the way I'm responding to them. And also too, and I think I didn't do a great job of this when I first started, is listening to what they're asking me and trying to push an agenda, really just doing what they're asking and helping with what they're asking. And then if the conversation continues, then possibly saying, well, did you consider this or could, so it's just it's really been a challenging position in that sense. So to wrap our goal setting conversation down here, Matt, we are going into, I guess, our third school year. We launched this podcast in January. So that was a half of a school year. And last year was a full school year. So this is our second full school year. So from a podcast perspective, what are you hoping to accomplish this year or improve in your game or something that you have a goal related to this podcast?
This podcast has selfishly, we've mentioned this before, been as much for ourselves as, the joy of hopefully talking to good educators and passing on some, ideas that you can go into your classroom on a Monday or, a Thursday and try actively, as well as realigning kind of perspectives. So I think naturally, we would not be doing this if we didn't say, like, I'd love to have a larger audience and continue to have that grow. And the Teach Better Network helps that, as well as, just continuing the quality that we have. One of my goals for our podcast is to continue looking at the format of our shows. We've got, 80 some shows with a fairly consistent cycle. And I really enjoyed our summer series kind of hyper focusing. But I love the idea of a really productive faculty room. When you're sitting around, you're kind of sharing what you're struggling with, and we kind of converse in this realm of, people that get it, providing constructive ideas that get it as well. There's nothing like that style feedback. And so one of my goals is to look at a format where, we can welcome educators in, whether it's, suggesting questions online or through email ahead of time that we talk about, live in person, those type ways that we can, kind of talk as human to human. How would I navigate that with my teaching style, Ken, how you would, and then, hopefully encourage the listener to kind of expand on how best meets their style as well.
Yeah, so I definitely had the same thought of, because we didn't talk about this before recording right now, of just analyzing our show format. Our audience continues to grow every week. And so I think there's value in the consistency of the way we've delivered this show. I think it's produced a really high quality conversation because we learned so much from amazing educators. We have guests lined up straight through January, which is amazing. So I'm excited to continue that. But like you said, analyze, are there ways to tweak it? So I also would like to throw out to our audience who is tuning in and week out, leave us comments on YouTube, leave us comments on wherever you're listening to the podcast for finding ways to improve. What are things that you would hate to see removed from the show? What are things that you think we could add or do a little bit different? I would love to get that feedback from our audience. For me personally, I have some public speaking skills that I want to continue to grow and develop and kind of not perfect, but get better at with just the way I'm speaking publicly. And a very unrelated goal is building my new studio. I will be finishing my basement from the ground up. I'll be doing all the work myself. So at some point, this green screen behind me will drop, and I will have a new backdrop that I'm kind of excited to design a very, very tiny space that is intended to be my podcast recording area. Because when I finished my previous basement, that backdrop that ended up being pretty nice was not even a podcast was not even a thought when I did that. But the last thing I would say is interacting with our audience a little bit more. Like I said, I would love to hear some comments. We have people that are listening to us on a regular basis, and the stats are showing us that. So I would love to get information. Leave us some comments. What do you like? What do you not like? What have you learned when you listen to a show? Is there something where you're saying, yes, I'm going to implement that tomorrow? So, those that are listening on a regular basis, I'd love to know why. What's the value that you're getting from the show, and how can we bring more of that on a weekly basis for everyone to think about?
Well,
Matt,
we might have
any closing thoughts?
We might have to get an email, a message board or something to that effect. But, I think with that being said, to the people tuning in, thank you for the time. I know this is
absolutely
an opportunity to kind of set your expectations for the the school year coming out of this summer. So whenever you're listening to it, whether, it could be in the middle of winter and you're making changes, there is a special group of people that listen to a podcast related to their profession. It's easy to listen to a podcast from an interest or something else, but the fact that you guys take time to listen to an education-based podcast that directly connects to your 9 to 5, well, unfortunately, much longer hours than that, is just kudos to you. And with that, interaction, there's plenty of feedback that we would love to hear and grow from you as well. So we appreciate your interaction, future interaction, and contributions to continuing to make this something that we continue to be very proud of.
Absolutely. So on that note, yes, you can, like I said, leave us comments on any platform that you're watching or listening. Our email is powereduup@gmail.com. I am at Ken Ehrman on social media. We are at PowerEduUp on social media. And Matt, why don't you tell the audience how they can connect with you? And then why don't you shut us on down here for another awesome school year of podcasts?
As Fred Rogers gave me the name. Okay, maybe he didn't, but my social media is EdTechNeighbor. And as we power down this episode, we wish you a incredible school year as we launch into our next season of podcasts. And we just kind of set out to make this even better than the last one. Keep the fuel going, and we're excited for the conversations upcoming. We got plenty of great ones coming up. So without further ado, we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.